Welcome to the Leading Owls podcast, brought to you by Rice University's Doerr Institute for New Leaders. Each week, we bring you inspiring stories and practical tips from successful student leaders, faculty, and staff, along with leadership experts and coaches that will help guide you in your own leadership journey. Today, we are sitting down with Aaron Pomerantz, PhD, a Postdoctoral Research Fellow at the Doerr Institute for New Leaders at Rice University. Aaron and I go beyond the bottom line in this episode to discuss the true ROI of leader development programs and how they can impact the culture and overall retention at organizations and institutions. We also discuss how important it is for organizations to be able to truly measure the outcomes of their leader development programs in order to determine the actual value that they are getting. Please welcome Aaron. Hi, Aaron. Thanks for joining us.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Can you start by telling us about your experience with leader development and why you believe it's important in today's world?
My experience with leader development there's the academic, researching it and impact assessment stuff that I do here at the Doerr Institute. But I also had a lot of experience in grad school and beyond grad school when I first got out that was kind of seeing what counts as leader development, especially in academic settings. And a lot of it honestly fit what the Doerr Institute was talking about in the book Leadership Reckoning, which was my first encounter with Doerr and what kind of made me feel some kinship and feel drawn to the Doerr Institute. There's a lot of leadertainment out there that I saw. I kept seeing things like, oh, this is stuff that seems enthusiastic, it's fun, it gets people excited, but I was kind of left going, what does this actually have to do with turning someone into a leader? And there was no impact or assessment. And I'm a social psychologist by training. My grad school program, we actually minored in my program, and I minored in quant. So I minored in measurement and stats. So for me to not see something being measured was really kind of upsetting because I'm like, well, you can't say this is working if you're not measuring it. And I'd also see these things where at best you'd have leadership training, so training specific skills. But even there, it'd be like, oh, we're going to do a conflict resolution workshop for 45 minutes once. And I'm like, that's not teaching anyone conflict resolution. But that was at least kind of as good as I was seeing with specific skills. And certainly not anything more in depth, like talking about transformational leadership or more fundamentally, who do you want to be as a leader or something like that. It wasn't an embracing of a process of leader development. It was ticking a box and saying, there we go, leader development is done. That's really important to not do, I think. I think leader development is important, and it's important to not settle when it comes to leader development. And this sounds very pie in the sky and idealistic, but I think it's true that if you want a better tomorrow, you need to lead, and you need leaders, and you need good leadership. I think everyone actually wants to be a leader and everyone wants to be developed as a leader, but they don't know it because I don't think I came up with this, but I couldn't find when I was prepping for this who might have come up with this. So maybe I came up with this, what I call the 3 Ps: power, prestige, or popularity. That's not being a leader. You can be popular and not be a leader, and you can't turn someone popular, certain fun songs in the musical Wicked aside. And you can seize power, but that doesn't mean people are going to actually want to follow you. And prestige isn't always the same as leadership. Leadership can involve any or all of those, but they're not the same thing. So when people think of leadership, they're like, I don't want to boss people around. I don't want to be the man or whatever it is. It's like, well, no, leadership is just influencing others and helping other people to accomplish goals. And whether you want to talk about big social issues or something small like getting your family in the car so that you can leave on time, each of those requires leadership. Each of those is an instance of leadership. So we all want to be leaders, but problem is that we kind of assume that leadership is something that you're born with or you're not, and it can't be developed, or just do this quick 5 steps and you're a leader now. It's not something that people see as a process, and it's not something I think that's centrally on people's minds. And so I think it's really important we get that message out there, which is quite evident that I think it's important because I've been talking for a long time. So, yeah.
What does the phrase beyond the bottom line mean to you in the context of leader development?
So to me, beyond the bottom line means that you're not just focused on the financial outcomes. And to be honest and to be clear, there are financial implications to leader development. Research shows that there are returns on developing leaders, and they are good for an organization. But that can't be your primary focus. And any more than I would say that, yes, children are great for the tax benefits. I have 2, and tax benefits were not on my mind with either one of them. That it is a fact that there is a tax benefit, but that's not why you have kids, hopefully. Same thing, there are going to be, or there could potentially be financial incentives. But leader development, it isn't about ROIs tangible ROIs, I would say, as much as it is about creating a culture and shaping people. It's about shaping individual leaders' identities, their self-awareness, their self-efficacy. And through that, they're going to shape the culture around them. They're going to shape other people too. So it's a more long-term, holistic, deeper meaning than just, will this push us farther into the black than we were previously?
How can organizations measure the true impact of leader development beyond financial returns?
So I'm going to speak a little broadly, because beyond saying you should be measuring it and measuring is important, there's going to have to be a lot of wiggle room, because it really depends on your organizational context. Everyone should measure leader development impact, because that's the only way you can say that it works. And that's actually, when I talked about leadertainment a little bit ago, that's actually kind of the problem with a lot of leadertainment, is people view success defined by what we call process measures. This many people showed up, or this many people said they had a good time. Well, one of my earliest leadership experiences was I was the lab manager for a couple of years when I was in grad school. If I wanted my research assistants, my undergraduate research assistants, to tell me they had a good time and all that, there was a really easy cheat: buy pizza. But that didn't mean they were actually paying attention and getting trained as research assistants or being developed in any way. They were eating pizza. So you need to have more than just what people enjoy. That being said, again, it really depends on the context in which you're trying to develop leaders. It sounds like I'm being weaselly, and I'm really trying not to be. But there are a few broad principles that I think we should be emphasizing whenever we try to measure development. The first is you have to be measuring self-views and identity of the individual leader. Leader development is not teaching. It's not specific knowledge, because you can have knowledge that you would have no intention of using ever. It's about who the person is. So you need to build and be able to measure changes in their identity, their self-awareness, and their self-efficacy. So who they think they are, how aware they are of who they think they are, and their beliefs about whether or not they can lead. Other relevant outcomes might be things like adaptability. There might be specific skills that you want a leader to have. So if this is in a context of a financial firm and the leader doesn't have any idea how money works, that's probably a problem. There are some related outcomes: resilience, EQI, so emotional intelligence. Those are things that generally tend to happen if leader development is being successful. And then you also want to measure things beyond the individual leader as well. The term that's used a lot is social capital. If a leader has been developed, there will be positive developments. That's very tautological. A developed person develops, and other people are going to be able to reflect that. So, maybe the people they're leading, look at their satisfaction, look at their psychological safety, their perceived well-being, their sense of belonging, their sense of support. Look at this leader's peers. How do they see that person? Look at this leader's superiors. How do they see that person? If a person is being developed, you're going to see a positive impact beyond just them. And beyond that, you want to measure at multiple times. No measurement is one and done, really, in anything, but definitely not in leader development. You want to measure in multiple ways. We call that triangulation. For instance, if you're just asking them, do you feel developed? Let's say they don't want to be developed and they don't like this. They're going to say, yes, I am developed. Let me out of here. But then if their peers and their direct reports aren't giving you data that suggests they're developed, you're like, I sense you're not actually being developed. In fact, I don't sense it, I see it. And finally, you want to make sure that the development tests you're using, the measures you're using, you want them to be valid. You want them to be realistic. You don't want to give them something that has obvious right and wrong answers. You want it to be something that matters.
In your experience, what are some common misconceptions about the value or effectiveness of leader development programs?
So there are a few of these. Sometimes they intersect in interesting ways, but broadly speaking, one really popular misconception is that leader development is nice, but not necessarily meaningful. Like, it would be nice to develop our leaders. It would also be nice to buy them a car, and it would be nice to buy them a nice new computer, but it's not necessary. The fact is that actually, yeah, it is nice, but it also has repercussions far beyond just buying this person a pizza or a new laptop or something. And one of the most meaningful ways that impact shows is in things like retention or satisfaction. If you want to be the sort of company or organization or club or college or whatever it is that people stay at, you want to develop your leaders. Another common misconception is that it's the same as leadership training. I kind of talked about that already. The idea is, I'm developing this leader. I'm teaching them delegation, conflict resolution. I'm teaching them prioritization or specific job-related skills. that can all be really important. Training is a part of development, and it's so much a part of development that sometimes people say one when they mean the other, even like people who've been doing this for longer than I've been alive. And I'm like, oh, he means development. And he said training, because they are so close, but they're still distinct. You can be trained and not developed. So let's say you learn delegation skills. You learn delegation skills from the absolute best delegation teacher there possibly could be. You learn it in a Catalyst module here at the Doerr Institute, where you could not possibly have had better training. But you also don't trust the people you're working with. You always assume you're the smartest person in the room. And that means that you assume that if you actually delegate, even though you know all these strategies, if you actually delegate, things are going to fail. So in this hypothetical situation, who you are as a person is getting in the way of you using that knowledge you have. So we need to address who you are as much as what you know. For instance, I know a lot of theoretical facts about basketball, but I am short and not really good with throwing spherical objects. So if we want me to play basketball, we need to change, first of all, make me a little bit taller, and second of all, make me have these skills. I can criticize, and I do, my favorite basketball teams on TV all day long, but that doesn't mean I am a basketball player. And it's kind of the same thing with training versus development. The last three are a little bit quicker. One is that it's just a matter of developing an individual leader. Well, no, it's not. It's as much about the environment as it is the person themselves. If they're not in an environment in which they can thrive and practice these things and be supported in their development, then they're not going to have these positive impacts I've been talking about. Relatedly, there's this idea that leader development is something something special. We reserve it for special people. We reserve it for people who show potential. I don't want to be too pie in the sky about this. Yes, it would be lovely if we could develop everyone. I recognize that not everyone can get every level of development ever. That's just an unfortunate reality of the world in which we live. But to just say, oh, we're going to hold leader development back until somebody has proven they're worthy, that's not going to change the culture of the organization or the environment or the club or, again, whatever it is. You're not going to see those long-term positive effects unless you make development something that is available to a lot of people. And finally, the idea that development stops. It doesn't. If you are developmentally minded, you're always going to be developing. You're always going to be better. It's the same way you don't kind of just say, I am healthy and I am done. I have achieved health. I am going to go eat nothing but Doritos and pizza or whatever it might be. It's an ongoing process. It's a lifelong learning process. That's what development is.
I have to say, you've really kind of blown my mind with some of these ways of thinking about things that I just hadn't before. Like, you can't be truly developed if you're in an unsafe situation or a poor environment. So that's just so interesting to me to think about that.
Yeah, a lot of development literature builds on social psychology and industrial organizational psychology. And both of those disciplines, they share an intellectual heritage. And there was a social psychologist, his name was Kurt Lewin, and he has what's called Lewin's equation. And it's B is a function of P and E. Behavior is a function of the person and their environment. And we live in a very individualist age where we just want to say it's all about me and I am an island. But the fact is, no one's an island. It's a truism, but some truisms are actually true. And if you're not in a supportive environment, you won't thrive. Whereas if you are in a supportive environment, it can be really surprising how many people can thrive and how well they can thrive.
That's amazing. How do you ensure that leader development translates into tangible long-term results for participants and their organizations?
I think it all goes back to that idea of taking a long-term perspective and thinking of this as a cultural shift, not a one-time program. So you need to think about application. You need to think about development, not just training. And you have to think about what are your specific needs? What are your mission, vision, and values as an organization? What does development look like to you? There is no one-size-fits-all solution. You need to embrace it as a process, something that is going to be continuous. There will be feedback. It's a cycle. You don't achieve it. It's something that keeps happening. And you're going to need some patience. Rome wasn't built in a day. Rome was also not destroyed in a day. It's going to take time to see those benefits, and there will be setbacks. Just because you see a setback doesn't mean that you've suddenly failed developing people. And just because it takes some time and you don't see it in these spectacular ways, like you're not going to come into work and suddenly it's a Disney movie and a cartoon deer is going to frolic across your path. This is a long-term process. But if you're patient and open, I think you'll see those results.
Are there key performance indicators or metrics that organizations can use to assess their leader development efforts? I mean, that is a pretty big question. So maybe if you just give us maybe a few of the top ones that you guys work with?
I mean, I would say it's a very big question, but it's a very small answer because I'm going to be annoying here and just say it really depends. What matters is that you're measuring identity. That's what I would say, is you have to look at the individual and their identity to see if they're being developed. But then you can also look at what do you expect to see if this person is being developed in the right way for our context? What would we expect? So, here at Doerr, we're going to look at the individual people who take a Doerr program, but we also do that in a bunch of ways. We look at their behavior, we look at their self-reports, but we'll also look at what other people say about them too. And we also try to do it longitudinally as much as we can. We don't want to just measure someone and say, yeah, that worked, and leave it done. I mean, we do want to see if there are long-term efforts and long-term success stories that we can talk about. That's what I would say is the take-home, is you should have varied KPIs that match your circumstances, and you want to do so in a multitude of ways.
Thank you for joining us for the Leading Owls podcast. We will be back next week with more leadership journeys and tips to share. New episodes release each Wednesday. For more information on the Doerr Institute for New Leaders and our free leader development programs for Rice students, please visit doerr.rice.edu.